Hi, this is Gary with MacMost.com. So with Apple's new MacBook Air, we have a lineup of MacBooks that will be stable for a little while. So a lot of people are thinking that this is the perfect time to buy a MacBook. The question is, which one is right for you? So let's take a look at some factors that can help you decide. First, let's look at the real lineup of MacBooks. It's more like they're 5 machines. Now they're even more than this because Apple's still selling some older machines. Like you can still get the old MacBook Air, for instance. But basically you've got the MacBook Air, and then 3 MacBook Pros. A 13-inch without a touch bar, one with a touch bar, and then a 15-inch high-end model. So when comparing these, of course, you're going to pay more to get more. And a lot of that is going to be in the CPU and GPU. People often forget that when thinking of the power of the machine, you have to look at the GPU too. You can't just look at the CPU. And with each version here, from MacBook all the way to the high-end MacBook Pro, you get more powerful CPUs and more powerful GPUs. Also a big difference is weight. And it's interesting to note that the lightest MacBook isn't the MacBook Air. It's not even close. The MacBook is actually the lightest. It's actually the smallest screen as well, which kind of adds to that. And the MacBook Pro, the 13-inch, isn't actually that much heavier than the MacBook Air. You also get more ports as you go up the scale. So you start with a MacBook that doesn't have a true Thunderbolt 3 port, but it has a port that can be used for lots of things. It could be used for USB, it could be used for power, of course, and it could be used for external video and all sorts of things. Then you go to Thunderbolt 3 ports and you only get to 4 ports when you get to the high end. Then you've got touch bars on the 2 highest end MacBook Pros. And on the MacBook Air you don't have a touch bar, but you do have the Touch ID button, which is very useful. And it's probably the best part of the touch bar is that Touch ID button, so you don't have to log in each time. So now that you can see the differences between them, let's try to figure out what these mean to you. So first, screen size. So a larger screen size is useful if you have to do certain things. Like for instance, if you have to work in a situation where there are multiple windows. You could be a researcher and need have multiple browser windows and writing windows when things open at the same time and easily available. It could be multitasking with whatever you have to do. Even if you use your MacBook as a TV. I know some people that don't have televisions but will use Netflix and the like on their MacBook to watch shows, and having a larger screen might mean the difference between having your MacBook on the table in front of you and having it on your lap all the time. Now if you deal with apps that have lots of complicated controls, then you're going to need a larger screen too. So lots of graphics and video apps that have tons of little palettes and tools and all this all over the screen. And if you're in a development environment as well, then you're probably going to have lots of little things all over the screen, and that's going to be more difficult on a smaller screen. Now how about power? A lot of people assign too much weight to this. They're thinking, what type of power do I need on my machine? But they're not actually doing much that uses the power. Things that use a lot of power are video editing. If you deal with large graphics, not just editing your photos, but doing things like print design and all of that. Anything where you're dealing with graphics, illustration, 3D graphics and modeling. Of course, if you're a gamer and you're playing games, then the bigger GPUs are going to be better for you. Not many people deal with data processing, but if you do use huge sets of data and have to process them with various different apps, then the CPU will come into play. Probably the biggest thing about the CPU and GPU power is future proofing. You're thinking of getting a low end machine now and thinking where that will leave you, say 5 or 8 years from now. It's going to be pretty weak. But a higher end machine might be overkill for what you need now, but 5 or 8 years from now may still be something that you use all the time rather than already having upgraded. Now weight. A lot of people are confused by this because there's so many people that don't care about weight, and they don't get why somebody would get a less powerful machine for more money. Right? To them the MacBook Pros are the only ones that are interesting. But a lot of people do care about weight. And if you are the type that cares about weight, and I'm one of them, then it can become a top priority. After all, if you buy a 15-inch MacBook Pro and you decide not to take it with you when you're traveling or on a trip or even just into the living room while you're watching TV, then it's no good at all, right? It's worse than the lowest end, oldest Mac because you don't even have it with you. So weight can be very important for some people. Now ports. When thinking of Thunderbolt 3, think of it as an expansion slot. I mean, you really can plug in devices that are super fast and add functionality to your Mac. But a lot of people get really hung up on having as many ports as possible. The thing is, you can always get a hub, and the hub can allow you to hook up multiple ports to your MacBook. So it's something to consider. If you need to have devices plugged in all the time, constantly, every time you use it, then you may need more ports. But if it's only occasionally that you need to sit it on a desk and plug it into lots of things, then really the number of ports doesn't matter. You're probably going to get a hub anyway. And a lot of things we do today are wireless. iCloud transfers all our photos from the iPhone to our Macs. We're using cloud storage, all this stuff. So attaching devices has become less and less important thinking in the future. Now Touch Bar is great for some pro users, using pro apps that are making good use of the Touch Bar and adding basically extra keys to your keyboard. But it's not something that we all necessarily need. And note that I think the most useful feature of the Touch Bar is the Touch ID, allowing you to log in easily. And the MacBook Air has this even though it doesn't have the Touch Bar. Okay, so let's look at some factors. The first factor I would think of when shopping for a MacBook is weight important to you? And usually this is the easiest question to answer because there are a lot of people that are like, no, it's not important at all. I want the best value for my money. I want the most powerful machine. I don't care what it weighs. And there are other people that are like, yes, I absolutely care what it weighs. It's very important. I need to carry it with me all day around work, to school. I need to bike with it and I need to have it in my backpack all the time. It's extremely important. So once you decide that really pushes you away from the MacBook Pros and towards maybe the MacBook or MacBook Air. Now what do you need it for? Thinking of, is this a machine just for you at home? Is this something you use for work? And what type of work do you do? And how well does each model suit what it is you do? If you're surfing the web and maybe just doing word processing all the time, then you probably don't need a very powerful CPU. But if you're doing development work, you may need a larger screen. If you're doing video editing, you may need more powerful CPU and GPU. How long do you need it to last? Right? If you want to buy something that's going to last for a long, long time, you may want to go with more powerful processors. Now, it may not affect which model you buy, but you may want to go for some of the upgrades to get something that's a little bit future-proofed. And how much is your dollar worth, right? People have different budgets. For some people, the money's not a factor, right? I mean, if you're using your MacBook for work and you make money by using your MacBook, then maybe you're not so concerned about the $500 difference or even $1,000 difference between models. But if it's the kind of thing where you're on a tight budget, then you may want to think about the price and whether you get upgrades and things like that. But then future proofing comes into it as well, because a cheaper MacBook may feel very outdated in 4 or 5 years, whereas a more expensive one may last longer. So let's look at some of the machines. If you're on a budget, what's the best one? Well, the MacBook Air actually has a lot of power in it compared to the lower end MacBook. So it's a little bit future proofed, but it's really not that much more expensive than the MacBook. So it's something that you may want to look into if you're on a tight budget. If you're a student, you're probably carrying this thing around with you all day long and you probably don't do high power things. I mean, yes, if you're in film school or something, you may want to have a MacBook Pro for video editing. But for a lot of students, you're doing research, you're writing, doing assignments, maybe some light spreadsheets, things like that. And having a really light MacBook that fits into your backpack very easily and doesn't have much weight could be really useful. Now, one big thing to consider, is this your main Mac or is it your second Mac? Because for me, I've got a desktop Mac and that's my main Mac. So I don't necessarily need a MacBook Pro, even though you think because I use it for work that I would go with a MacBook Pro. But for me, I'd rather have a lightweight second Mac to carry with me easily while I travel. Now, if it's your primary Mac and you do work on it especially, but you don't have a desktop at all, then MacBook Pro may be your best bet because it packs all the power, it will last a little bit longer, you can get the larger 15-inch screen if you want. So that might make more sense for you. So these are all some things to consider. But the right answer, I really think, is to get to an Apple store. I would never buy one of these MacBooks without first trying each one in an Apple store. So find an opportunity to do that or get to any local computer store that's going to have each model and try it out. Because you may be surprised when you actually get your hands on them how much more or less weight is important to you or how fast the lower end models seem to you for what you need to do, things like that. So I highly recommend never buying a MacBook unless you actually can set aside some time, take a trip to the Apple store and see what they're really like.